Good afternoon, everyone. It's Tuesday, May 20th. Welcome to Council Chambers. We're going to be having an in-camera session meeting. I'm going to call our meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. We're going to start with a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Moving on to our land acknowledgement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and waters in which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving on to item number 2, does anybody have any pecuniary interest to disclose in respect to today's agenda? Seeing none, moving on to item number 3, closed session. Today, we will be proceeding in closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act to address items pertaining to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, Section 239(2)(e), and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, Section 239(2)(f). This is related to an update on a legal matter. Can I get a mover and seconder to proceed into closed session? Moved by Councillor Todd, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? Thank you. And once we come out of closed session, I will provide a rise and report publicly. Good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday, May 20th. And I'm going to be calling our council meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. We're going to start with a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Moving on to our land acknowledgement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga Anishinaabe traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and waters on which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving on to item number 2, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I note that none were received prior to tonight's meeting. And I also want to say that I have a pecuniary interest related to item 11.1, so I'll be leaving the room when the item is being discussed. And the Deputy Mayor will assume the chair. Moving on to item number 3, closed session. Earlier today, Council passed a motion to proceed into closed session at 5:30 p.m. to consider business as permitted under the Municipal Act and is listed on today's agenda. This motion was passed in public session, streamed live, and was in accordance with our closed meeting policy. Item number 4, business arising from closed session. In the continuing interest of transparency, I can report at this open meeting the outcomes from today's session. Council approved the in-camera minutes from May 13th, 2025. This was the last time Council met in closed session. Council received information regarding an update on a legal matter in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Act. And can I get a mover and seconder on the following motion that Council receive confidential report FS 05-2025 for information? A mover for that? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. Moving on to our announcements, updates, and recognitions. I'm sure that many of you did not know that it's National Public Works Week this week, May 19th to 2025, and we are very proud to recognize the dedicated staff behind all the essential services that keep Port Hope moving, from clean water to safe roads and infrastructure updates. A lot of the really invisible work of the municipality, but the impact of public works is really everywhere and always essential. So, a huge thank you to our public works staff for your expertise, reliability, and the pride that you take in keeping Port Hope running smoothly and looking its best. I have a couple of other announcements. I want to announce that Kyle Beacock is going to be departing the municipality of Port Hope. It's his last 2 days. He is the Director of Environmental Services in charge of water and wastewater and environmental remediation. We want to thank Kyle very much to his service to the municipality. I think we've come to realize what a unique set of skills he had to be able to basically bridge those two sets of responsibilities within one position, and we wish him all the best in his future professional endeavors. And I also want to announce that today is the last council meeting of our interim CAO, Tanya Bennett. I want to recognize that. I want to thank you very much, Tanya, for your steadfast leadership over the last 6 months. 6 months just does go by so quickly. You came to us in a moment's notice. You helped us through some very difficult files, some very challenging times in the municipality, and we're very grateful for your steadfast hand, for your people skills, and for keeping everything moving forward in the municipality so well. We're very grateful, and we celebrate you today. Thank you very much. Now, do any of our council members have any updates that they would like to share? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I have an exciting update coming to us from the GRCA. They are offering an opportunity to get discounted rain barrels in 2025. So rain barrels are a great way to conserve water and reduce costs on your property. In 2025, rain barrels are being offered in a variety of styles and price points through rainbarrel.ca. You would need to order. It's opening tomorrow. So you would go into the website tomorrow and you go down to Port Hope and you'll see all your options. And you would need to order before June 16th. You'll be getting a $25 discount, and that is the price. The price is already factored into what you see online. Discounted pricing will be offered to the residents within the Township of Hamilton, the Town of Cobourg, the Municipality of Port Hope, and the Municipality of Clarington within the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority. You can learn more as well about other ways you can conserve water, trees, plants, and protect your local watershed by going to the GRCA website. And the other detail that I don't have listed here is that the rain barrels will be delivered to your address as well. So for those of you who do not have that ability to go pick it up, not to worry, you can still order and have it delivered. So that's starting tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Any other updates from the council table? Any other announcements? Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, delegations. It is now time for our delegations. We have 3 delegations on the agenda tonight. I just want to remind everybody, as you come up to delegate, to make sure you press the purple button on the right-hand side before you're speaking. Our first delegation, 6.1, is Teresa Decker, Vice President, Nuclear Growth and Sustainability, Ontario Power Generation, regarding potential for new nuclear generation at the Wesleyville site. And we have extended your presentation to 15 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Teresa Decker. I'm the Vice President of Nuclear Growth and Sustainability at Ontario Power Generation, and it's really my pleasure to be here tonight to present to Port Hope Council on powering possibilities in Port Hope. with exploring the potential for new nuclear at OPG's Wesleyville site. I'm going to attempt to click myself, but we'll see. Okay, works. Awesome. So I thought before diving into some of the work that we've been doing at the Wesleyville site, it'd be helpful to provide a bit of an overview on OPG's electricity system. So you can see it kind of starts at the top with the Ministry of Energy, who sets provincial energy policies and priorities, and they oversee agencies like the Independent Electricity System Operator, the Ontario Energy Board, and ourselves at OPG, as well as Hydro One. If we sort of go down the next step, we've got the Independent Electricity System Operator. They really manage the real-time market electricity grid. They also look at longer-term plans and plan for future needs of the electricity system and balancing that supply. The Ontario Energy Board has a role around setting electricity rates and ensuring energy companies comply with regulations. They actually regulate both the electricity sector and the natural gas sector, and really their intent is to protect consumer interests to promote affordable but also sustainable energy sector. And for us, OPG, we are a utility that generates electricity. So really our focus is on providing clean, reliable, and cost-effective power. Those are the areas that we focus on. And then there's a whole host of companies that are involved in the transmission and distribution system, which eventually translates over to consumers, both residential, industrial, and otherwise. So I think it's an important context-setting piece that kind of shows how OPG fits into the picture. And I'll flip to the next slide, which describes a little bit more about OPG. So as I mentioned, we are a generator. We work across the province. We have a pretty diverse generation fleet that encompasses 66 hydroelectric stations, 2 nuclear stations, 2 thermal generating stations, and we have a solar facility as well. In addition, we operate a natural gas-fired fleet, 4 stations actually, through our subsidiary Atura. And we also have 86 hydroelectric stations in the US through another subsidiary called Eagle Creek Renewable Energy. So pretty diverse portfolio. In addition to the generation side, we do have a number of large projects underway, including refurbishment of our nuclear facilities, hydroelectric expansion, and construction of our new nuclear Darlington. So all of that sort of connects and ties into what the energy system looks like going forward. As Ontario's economy and demand for clean electricity, as well as the importance of energy security grows, so too does the need to explore the potential for new generation at Wesleyville, including new large nuclear. According to the ISO, which I mentioned on the previous slide, there's a potential for demand to grow in the province by about 75% by 2050, which is pretty significant. That's the equivalent of 4.5 cities the size of Toronto. And so meeting that demand is going to require a lot more electricity. And given that these larger projects are fairly lengthy, we do need to start planning now. So we've been working with the province on these plans for energy demand and developing options for new nuclear generation, new generation in general, which includes nuclear. And really where the province is heading is they are prioritizing affordability and reliability. They're really the foundation from the province's perspective of growth and prosperity. So it does require an all of the above approach, which includes significant generation build out through competitive procurements, refurbishments, hydroelectric developments, as well as exploring new nuclear. So that brings us to why Wesleyville. Back earlier this year in January, the Ontario government asked OPG to begin discussions with Indigenous and municipal leaders on existing sites, three strategic sites in particular, one in Port Hope, as you all are, Haldimand County and St. Clair Township. And really it was to determine if there would be support for new energy generation to meet the increases in demand that I mentioned. So OPG's Wesleyville site, which is in Port Hope, does provide an ideal site for hosting large nuclear development. There's a couple reasons why that's the case. The first being the size of the site. So it's 1,300 acres, and there's a lot of features of the site that are well suited to large generation. Of course, it's been municipally zoned for more than 50 years. It has the potential for co-location with other industries, existing access to transmission, railroads, railways and roads. And then there's also a sufficient exclusion zone, which I'll talk a bit more about. The site has the potential to host pretty significant amount of generation, up to 10,000 megawatts electrical, which would be enough to power 10 million homes. And it's also located very close to Pickering and Darlington, which we affectionately are starting to call the Durham-Northumberland Clean Energy Corridor, potentially. If we go to the next slide, we can actually look at what does that mean when we look at the site. So I'll just lay out a couple of things or explain a couple of things on here. If you look at the red portion of the site, the red outline, that is the OPG owned property. Within that area that is outlined in red, you see some orange shading. That is the area that could have potential for power generation. The land that's highlighted in yellow is really meant to support transmission. And then you see a portion on the right-hand side of the map there that is blue. It's really an area that could be potentially used for co-locating industries. Up at the top, you'll see that there's some land outlined in purple, and that is land that's owned by Hydro One. And then there's two small blue plots kind of in the middle of the diagram there, which are currently leased lands by OPG. You'll also see we've marked evaluated and unevaluated wetlands in green on the map as well. So this is a very preliminary view of what plans could look like at Wesleyville, but it is something that we've been sharing. It is available on our website. I would say that some of the initial assessment work that we're doing really looks at what the impact could be to local infrastructure, and you'll see there's also a white hatched line that shows potential changes to some of the roads. That is something that we're going to be looking at going forward, and minimizing impact to the local community is something that is a key focus for us. In terms of timelines, as I mentioned, these types of projects are fairly long, lengthy duration type projects. So where we are today, you can see sort of the we are here very, very early days, just sort of past the province asking us to explore this potential based on willingness of the community. And so the area of focus for us going forward is really around early site work, establishing a memorandum of understanding with Port Hope, preparing to submit an initial project description, which is going to kick off the impact assessment process. And I'll speak about that a little bit more. And then following on from that, you'll see that regulatory approvals happen in and around the late 2020s. At that point in time, if we are approved to get a license to prepare the site, that would actually kick off a multi-year regulatory process through our nuclear regulator, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. So if site prep work were to be approved and started in the early 2030s, we would then subsequently apply for a license to construct in the early 2030s, and then a license to operate later in that decade. And that would translate into construction at the site and in-service date of the units starting in the early 2040s, assuming that all kind of goes to plan. I think the important point to note on this slide in terms of the timeline is that we view engagement as a really important part of this process, and it does happen throughout the entire duration of the process. On that note, as I mentioned, building strong relationships and partnerships with our host communities is something that's very important to OPG. And so since this spring, we've engaged with more than 1,200 members of the public and key stakeholders in Port Hope through a variety of initiatives, we've really tried to make sure we're transparent, foster community involvement, provide opportunities for information sharing and feedback. We've had information booths at community events, and we've met regularly with some local stakeholders and public and community groups. And that's something, as I mentioned, that is going to continue throughout planning and eventually, hopefully, execution. We recently held some public information sessions in April and spoke to more than 100 residents at those sessions, which we used to, again, share information on the project through a variety of methods. And in addition to those sessions, we have sent out a mass mailer to all of the postal codes in Port Hope. So we are trying to engage with the community in a variety of methods. One of the things I did want to highlight, which is exciting, we're soon going to have an in-community information center at 115 Toronto Road in Port Hope. We're hoping to open it in June or July, and so we're hoping to see community members and yourselves there. Again, it's meant to sort of allow for that dialogue and ask questions and continue that outreach. The other point that I wanted to flag is that earlier in the year, there was an initial assessment done by the Conference Board of Canada on what the potential economic benefits of building a large nuclear generation facility could look like. So for the Wesleyville site, they assumed it could be 8 to 10,000 megawatts, and really, used other information from other benchmarks, large nuclear projects, as input. And so the way that the calculations work, they're kind of split between design and construction phase versus operations and maintenance phase. And I think ultimately what it means for potentially Port Hope is a fairly significant boost to GDP, 65.7 billion. Locally, significant number of jobs, 1,700 potential jobs during design and construction phase and 1,600 during operations and maintenance phase, which is about a 15 to 20% boost in overall employment levels locally. And then up to 10.5 million in municipal tax revenues once we actually get going. In addition to some of those benefits that I flagged, I think it's important to also note there could be supply chain spending benefits, additional employees working and living in the region that is, an important benefit, as well as corporate and employee charitable giving and other environmental initiatives, including biodiversity. I think as an operator, what we really focus on, given the fact that we operate a pretty significant fleet, is investing in local economies, and we employ thousands of people to maintain the modern, sophisticated fleet that we have. And so as we partner with local environmental and Indigenous groups to improve the well-being of our site communities, that is really a part of what we endeavor to do, is ensure that host communities do derive the value that we see from the economic, social, and infrastructure benefits associated with a generation project of this size. So to conclude, what's next? What's next? A lot of continued public engagement. As I mentioned, we've been at a number of community events, and we plan to continue to do so over the summer and the fall. We've got information booths coming up. We're opening up the info center, as I mentioned, and we just encourage that active dialogue to continue. I also mentioned the memorandum of understanding. That is something that we are looking to finalize between OPG and Port Hope, and looking to do that before Q2 of this year. And then early site work. We are looking to study the characteristics of the site, understand the conditions that'll help us assess what type of potential facility could be there and whether it is feasible for nuclear. And kind of associated with that is the initial project description. So that is something that we're planning to submit to the Impact Assessment Agency later in the year, Q3, Q4, and that'll formally begin the impact assessment process. As we continue through the project, we will be continuing to provide updates like this to council and have many other mechanisms for which to share information. So our website will be a key area that we put updates. We've got a toll-free number, and again, through community events, we hope to continue to engage the community in that dialogue. With that, I wanted to really thank Council for allowing me to come speak about this exciting endeavor tonight, and happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for that presentation and all the information that you've shared. I know I've got about 8 different questions here, but I'm going to go around the table and ask my colleagues for any questions or comments around the presentation. Councillor Less.
Thanks, Teresa. Nice to see you again. Could you just touch on the byproduct you throw off in terms of isotopes?
Can you clarify what you're looking to get more information on in terms of isotopes? Okay, so do you mean, is that a possibility for what we might potentially find here? Yeah, it certainly is. It would be dependent on the technology, but isotopes, we think that's an important part of one of the values of coming out of nuclear medical isotopes. We produce them at Pickering and Darlington, and so that is something that I would say would be considered. And it depends on the technology, but it's absolutely something that we would have as a factor in helping us to select that.
No, did I understand correctly that we're the only producer in Canada?
Um, no. So Bruce Power does produce some isotopes, and then there are, depending on the type of isotope, there are other types of research and development facilities that also produce them. But CANDU technology, if that is the way we were to go, that is the technology we have today. There are some advantages to how we produce them, which is
those two potential agreements and how that's connected to the flow of growth readiness funds
Yep.
to support infrastructure needed to support the plant.
Sure. So the MOU really is the document that bridges us from now. It outlines how we work together between now and when the willing host agreement is in place. The willing host agreement is timed with having a proper project that's approved to go forward. And so between now and then, we do have some funding set aside to allow that continued building capacity, making sure that the municipality has the capacity and funding needed to actively engage is important. So there is that funding in this interim period. After that, I would say once we have an actual project, that's where more of the infrastructure readiness piece comes into play. Yeah.
Thank you. Could you just keep going, so I'll insert myself into the questioning at this point. I did have that same question about, could you clearly distinguish for the public the differences between the MOU and the project description and then the more eventual host agreement? So I think we've got a better sense of it. But I want to drill down a little bit more on the MOU. Can you give us just a little bit more information about how the MOU also relates to the engagement process that you are undertaking at the moment and the role and responsibilities of the municipality expected in that process?
Yeah, I think the intent of that MOU is to outline how we work together. And so one of the principles is active community engagement. So it really solidifies the fact that we're going to align on how we engage the public as we get through this process. I would think that is a key aspect of the MOU. Or was there another element that you wanted me to cover there?
No, I think that's terrific, but I think it should also be clear to the public that the MOU is between ourselves and OPG
That's right.
around your process, but that we will also be having a separate independent process so that there is not a misunderstanding that somehow
Yep.
both of those processes are part of the MOU.
Correct.
So just moving along, at various parts in your presentation, you talked about up to 10,000 megawatts, from 8 to 10,000 megawatts. And I've had this conversation with OPG numerous times. And I think the public wants to know, what are they engaging on exactly? And can you be precise as to what they are actually contemplating? Instead of a maybe this or maybe that, is it 10,000 megawatts, in fact?
Yes, absolutely. So I think for clarity, it is up to 10,000 megawatts we're considering from a nuclear perspective. So that is a key focus area. And now the reason that there's a range is because there's different nuclear technologies that we're assessing. So based on the technology and how it can be put on the site, that is what really drives the 8 to 10,000 megawatts. But I to clarify, we are very focused on assessing the potential for nuclear at the site.
Okay, and thank you for talking about just the different technologies that possibly could be going at this site. I have a question. Do you anticipate that the municipality will have a place at the table in terms of discussing the potential technologies for Wesleyville?
Yes, absolutely. There's two big factors that relate to nuclear technology selection. One is going to be engagement, not only with the municipality, but the rights holders. The second is going to be the site-specific studies that we're doing to understand technically what the site can accommodate.
Okay. And my last question for while I'm here, can you tell us a little bit more about the Indigenous engagement that you are leading on this project, so we can better also understand what we might be doing in terms of the municipality, in terms of engagement as well? So
Yeah, absolutely.
just clearly describing that process.
Yes, absolutely. Indigenous engagement is something that we got started early. We have been having frequent conversations with the Mississauga Nations of the Williams Treaty First Nations. I would say that the conversations to date have really been on two key areas. One is on economic participation, whether there's an opportunity for them to have equity in the project if it does eventually get approved. And then the other piece is really around the site studies that I referenced, how they can be engaged in that, as well as the initial project description. So those are the two areas that we have been actively having conversations with the Mississauga Nations.
Thank you. Moving along the horseshoe. Any questions or Councillor Adam?
Thank you. So many of the questions have brought up the different technologies over and over. So a lot of us know about the CANDU reactor and the SMRs. What are the other technologies that are potential for this that may bring that up to that 8,000 to 10,000?
Yep, that's a great question. Thank you. So we did sign MOUs with two additional companies to assess their technologies, Westinghouse and EDF. Each have large nuclear technologies as well that are deployed not in Canada but worldwide, and so warrant inclusion in that as well.
Any further questions, Councillor Adam? No. Councillor Darrell? Yes, please go ahead.
I just want to say that having the opportunity to tour the facility at Darlington, I just want to point out what really stood out to me was the level of safety. So many other industries that I've been a part of could really take a page from the nuclear safety playbook, so to speak, and really implement some of that stuff. And just wondering, could you touch on maybe some of the things for public engagement that will be available at the Toronto Road office, and what are you doing? I know we spoke a bit on the tour, but for the public to know around the high school and stuff in the area, for get the kids involved.
Yeah, I would say our engagement program is evolving, so we're open to feedback if there's additional items that we should incorporate. I would say at the Toronto site, it will be there will be some visuals, an opportunity. Staff will be there to ask questions. There will be handouts. It'll be that type of interactive experience with the staff primarily, and then we'll be out at different events. Fanny, we were there. We had a booth, and other events like that going forward to make sure there's an opportunity for that dialogue.
Thank you very much. Any last comment or question from around the table? So thank you very much, Teresa. And did I hear you commit to coming to quarterly reports to council?
Yes, we'd be
Terrific.
happy to. We'd be happy to do that.
So the recommended motion is on the agenda to receive this delegation for information. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to our next delegation, 6.2, Helen Evans, Pam Buttery, and Gemma Racine, Port Hope High School, community regarding PHS community survey and workshop findings, recommendations, and offers. So welcome, and please press the purple button.
Thank you. Does anybody recognize that building on the screen there? And Daryl, thank you for the amazing segue into the presentation that we're going to be giving this evening. That was great. Welcome. We're happy to be here. My name is Pamela Buttery, and I am a resident in Port Hope. And actually, I spent the 90s at Port Hope High School, and it wasn't as a student, just in case you're confused. I was teacher there for the 90s, and I'd like to introduce my fellow committee members, Helen Evans and Gemma Racine. And Helen and I are both former educators, and Gemma is a parent and also sits on 2 of the school councils in the region. And the reason why we wanted to speak to you tonight as a delegation is because we formed a committee. We strongly believe that we, in a vibrant high school for Port Hope, and we think that it's an important asset not only for the students and the youth in our community, but also for economic reasons and for community connectedness. And the way we started, and I'll explain the process in a little bit, but right now in terms of our inspiration came from Cormac Russell, who is he comes from Ireland, but he teaches at the university level, and he talks about community development and sustainability. So it's ABCD, which is great for us as educators. But asset-based community development is an approach to advancing community goals that center community members in the identification of community goals and solutions to local challenges. ABCD encourages us to harness the abundant assets that we believe exist within the Port Hope community, and it's empowered us to create the change that we want. There's 3 aspects of this community development, and we're talking about centering our students and families and their neighbors. We're talking about empowering all of us as citizens to nurture community and support the experience for our students, and then to harness our community. We know that Port Hope is full of energy, ideas, and talents, and we want to complement the investments through the school board. So this is the engagement process that we went through as a committee, and some of you here probably were involved in some of the process, and we really appreciate that. We started off just forming our group, a very small group. There's another member, there's 4 of us, and we began to think about how can we enhance Port Hope High School, what can we do as community members in that way. When we'll show some data later, and one of the things we wanted to do is increase the enrollment, and to do that with community partnership with the Kawartha Pine Ridge Board of Education. So we started with a listening series where we talked to community members from a diverse group, some retired, some communities, some business people, students, all kinds of different members. And then after the listening circles, we put out a survey. Some of you may have filled in. We were amazed. We got over 500 people responding to our survey online. And from that, we gathered data that we're going to share with you this evening. After that, we took the data from the survey, and we had a workshop. Some of you may have attended at Port Hope High School. And we talked to different groups that came to the workshop. There were probably about 75, 60 plus participants. And we asked questions about what you'd like to contribute in terms of Port Hope High School, and how we can work together to make it a vibrant high school. And then finally now, we're going to explain some of the things that we'd like to do in terms of working with the council and the Kawartha Pine Ridge Board, and some of the action items that we're going to share with you. And this is some data here. I won't spend a lot of time on here, just really quickly. You can see, maybe, if you can see from the survey, that 95% of the people that answered our survey, remember there were 600 people that filled it out, feel that Port Hope High School is an important community asset. 88% feel that the community can take more responsibility to support a vibrant Port Hope High School. 92% of the people that filled in the survey feel that all students in Port Hope should be able to attend Port Hope High School. And finally, this number is not quite as high. 6% felt that Kawartha Pine Ridge have invested appropriately for Port Hope High School. And I'm going to pass it over to Gemma.
So I think this slide is really important to see that the line in red shows the number of our students at feeder schools. So there's an upward trend in the number of students that are at our primary and middle school, but concerningly, the trend in the number of students attending our high school is actually in fact declining. And this is the motivating reason that our group, and these are absolutely incredible women to be working with, have we got together and we want to try and make a difference. If we look at the next slide, what are the opportunities that could help to drive enrollment? And I think interestingly, and this is actually a very promising factor, many factors that ranked high for parents and students are factors that could in fact be changed by increasing enrollment. So if we look at the top, more friends going to the school, more academics related to interests, fewer split classes, more extracurricular opportunities. There's also an opportunity for offering French immersion. This was something that was an important factor for both parents and students. And you'll see the factor which is starred, less stigma in the community. And this was really a high factor for students and for parents. And this is something that I think as a community, we can really start to shift by paying attention to what's happening at the school, but what's happening, inside the building. We can really start to see a shift in that stigma piece. When you look at the data, and here we have the current grade 8s at Dr. Hawkins, and we're looking at the numbers where these students are going starting in September of this year. On the left-hand side is the French immersion stream. None of these students are able to stay and go to the high school. They have to leave our community to continue their French immersion education. You can see that 55% are going to CCI, 45% of this cohort are going to St. Mary's. On the right-hand side, you can see that of the English stream, only 70% of the English students are in fact choosing Port Hope High School to continue their education, their high school education.
I think the most important thing that we need to know about the drain is the financial drain. We have our wonderful students taking the bus on Highway 2, and I imagine their backpacks are full of $13,500 worth of the taxes, or sorry, I should say the per head funding model that is afforded to each student. They're trundling to Cobourg. If we could change that around, we can then bring those students back into Port Hope. It equates really to $2 million going out, because every student in grade 9 that's going, and then grade 10, and then grade 11, this whole thing of the stigma of here and the assumption that all children, or many of them, 50% of them, are going to go to Cobourg, is really one that is financially devastating, and we need to look at changing and reimagining how that should look. We look at the last time. I want you to imagine that bus turning and coming back into our fabulous community, and our children investing in their home school. That's what we discovered when we did the survey of people. They really felt children going to their own school was really important. I want you to imagine the funds that could be brought into Port Hope High School and what that would do to the type of programs and the type of community access that could could be managed with that. The ripple effects are huge.
So what can we do to turn this around and turn that bus around and bring the funding back to this community? One of the key things, and I mentioned that earlier, is 30% of students off the bat are not able to go to the high school. That is a significant loss of students that are not able to go, and that is because there's no French immersion at Port Hope High School. This is obviously something that is the board's, responsibility, but I think as a municipality, we can advocate that all of our students in our community deserve to be able to continue their high school education at our community school. The second factor on the list is the new and unique academic programming. So this is something that is important because this would be a pull for not just our local students, but could bring students from outside of our community to our community high school. So these are two things that we believe could be advocated by us and the municipality.
A few other things that we thought we could do along with KPR, the marketing communication campaign, that came about both in the workshop that we had and also in the survey, that's something that some community members would be willing to work with the rest of the group in terms of marketing and campaign and just getting messages out there. And the other thing is show up to events at the schools as community members, volunteer, explore community partnerships, and all of those things are things that we can look towards in the future.
We'd like to thank the council at this time for addressing some of the transportation issues that are part of what goes on at the school. Getting kids into the school is one of the biggest priorities. So with the municipality looking at transportation for students, free transportation, we just would love a huge shout out for that for you as well. The school's open. It's welcoming. I've been in their building. The kids are happy in both Hawkins and in Port Hope High School. They are genuinely happy to be there. I want us all to remember too that the stigma and the eye rolling about, oh, that's that school, is really detrimental to all of us. All of those students, the 240 kids and the teachers there, don't need our eye rolling. They don't need the same old status quo, because there's a vibrancy that's going on there that's phenomenal. I think we need to talk to Teresa over here about OPG and or the Wesleyville site. There are many magical, wonderful things happening. This is a quarter century in, and new and vital and improved academic excellence can be and should be, and I'm going to say will be, part of Port Hope High School. And so this stage, we'd just like to celebrate. We made it in 9 minutes, 10 minutes. Nobody has hooked us up. And to say thank you again so much for allowing us to be here, for being part of so many of the conversations that we've had, and just generally reveling in this marvelous community that's Port Hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for coming forward and sharing this presentation with council and the community, but more importantly, for all the hard work that went into producing this kind of presentation. It's clearly been quite a process. We appreciate and value the time and the hours and the efforts that went into bringing forward this information for us to have in front of us, and to just identify the areas that we can affect and that we can advocate for. And on that note, I want to start by acknowledging and thanking Councillor Clare and Councillor Todd for bringing forward the very important motion that got us over the line with making the changes in transportation that are going to positively affect the high school. I also do want to assure you that I've probably met with the Director of Education on this matter 8 or 9 times. I have a meeting scheduled with Minister Calandra. I've met with the superintendent and the trustees. I've also discussed with OPG connections with the high school, and also a number of other educational institutions, from Loyalist to Ontario Tech to McMaster, about what are some of those unique offerings and programmings that have been brought forward. So I know that there's a lot of advocacy work that is happening. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I think that between the community-driven efforts, the advocacy around this table, and the advocacy to the different levels of government, that we're definitely rowing all in the same direction. And that I think that even though we haven't landed exactly where we want to be yet, that some very good seeds and foundations have been planted. But it's wonderful when you get a community-driven project that aligns with some of the advocacy efforts as well that are happening. So thank you very much for that. Any comments or questions, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. When I saw the number of how many students are enrolled, when I went to high school, not here, but somewhere else, there was 2,500 students. So I can't imagine being in such a large school with just over 200. It must be difficult to really be motivated to come to school. So in 2018, 2 councils ago, we had a big forum at the high school, and there was a big long list of wonderful things that were going to happen at that school, and it doesn't look like those things have happened. So that's disheartening. Another thing that the mayor forgot to mention was that we have a youth counselor as well now. and 2 youth counselors, and one does go to Port Hope High School. So I think that's a great way to connect as well. So that's fabulous. The question I had for you is that, have you considered as well that Newcastle is building a high school, and there's potentially Millbrook will be getting a high school, and we have a large number of students in the rural areas on those borders that are kind of wanting to go those directions right now anyway. Have you heard from those students and those families in the rural area? I can assume if you're living in the far end of Port Hope, you're not going all the way over to Coburg, but they may be wanting to go to Newcastle. Have you thought about that at all?
Right now, my sense of where the rural students are going, so North Hope is our rural school. Those students are going primarily to St. Mary's because there's no French immersion, so they're English students, and they go into town for a couple years and then they head back out of town. I haven't heard any. I am connected with student council members at different schools. I haven't heard them wishing or wanting to go towards Newcastle. I think they want to stay in this community. And some of them are Port Hope alumni. So like a lot of them are really hoping that this becomes a place that their children can go. But yeah, right now they are exiting. They're going to Coburg, St. Mary's.
Which we should say is not a public school in the format that, they could go to the Coburg Collegiate Institute, but they're taken out into the Catholic system. So those monies, that's 13,500, does not stay in KPR's board at all. Money.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Todd.
Thank you. I have some questions about the surveys or the data that you put forward. When you did the surveys, were these students who were considering, like they're on their way out to high school, or did you also include people who are currently going to Coburg schools and ask them, if this changed, would you come back to Port Hope?
So the student respondents were both current and prospective. So students that were looking and trying to understand where they were going to go for high school, but also students that were at Port Hope High School and at CCI and St. Mary's. So we really tried to grasp the majority, all Port Hope based students and kind of get a sense of where they are, where they're headed. But if those that chose not to go to the high school and were choosing to leave and go to Coburg, what would bring them back? So there was that graph showing the different factors, and that those are things that would potentially change the outcomes if we were able to solve those issues for them.
May I add to that? With those things on the graph, they were talking about more academic programming. Well, if you have more students, you'll have more academic programming. If they talked about not having split classes, well, if you have more students, that's not going to happen. Talk about the stigma that's going on. Well, if you have more students, do you understand the thread that's going on?
Thank you. Councillor Clare.
Yeah, just to further on the question about disaggregation. So as everybody should know, there is also a full report that was attached to this delegation on the agenda, and I urge you all to look at that. There is a full page that shows the full disaggregation between current parents, parents of prospective students, parents of students who went elsewhere for high school, students, prospective students, current students, students who went elsewhere, alumni, etc. So if you're interested in seeing all of those perspectives broken out, there's much more detailed graphs and additional information that didn't make it in the 10 minutes as well.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions or comments, we appreciate very much you coming this evening and sharing all that information with us. And our final delegation. Oh, yes. Yes, of course. I was so caught up in saying thank you that I forgot that we should actually accept this for information. So can I get a mover and seconder to receive that? Councillor Less is our mover. Councillor Clare is our seconder. All in favor? And that is passed. Our final delegation for this evening is 6.3, Mary Brown regarding the Northumberland Humane Society. So I now welcome Mary Brown. Please press the purple button when you come up to the podium, and you might just need to lower the mic so we can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Thank you very much for, thank you very much for allowing me this time this evening.
Mary, can you just move the mic a little bit closer to you? So,
Okay.
yes, thank you very much.
I'm a long-term resident of Port Hope. I've been an active animal advocate for over 25 years, and I've been on 2 animal welfare board of directors, as well as on the Markham Animal Care Committee. My working career was investigating multi-million-dollar life insurance claims in 3 different countries and conducting procedural audits to assure compliance with corporate expectations and legislative compliance. I've also done staff training and procedural streamlining. So I do have a little bit of background in my concerns here tonight. Port Hope is currently contracting with the Northumberland Humane Society for animal control services, and the services aren't just about stray dogs or nuisance complaints. They involve health, safety, law enforcement, and taxpayers' accountability. These services are delivered under a contract by a private charity, yet funded in part by public money. The community has the right to ask, are these services compliant with the law? Are they humane in their practice, and are they financially accountable? It's the municipality's legal responsibility for oversight. It's not a choice. The reason that I'm here is that I've been told that its municipality is not going to conduct any oversight, but according to the various provincial laws and municipal laws, that's not a choice. The first reference I wanted to make was with the Municipal Act of 2001, and it recognizes and the act that you do have the legal authority over animal welfare. Section 8 gives broad powers, but it also gives responsibilities. Under Section 10, the municipalities are required to deliver services in a manner that is transparent, accountable, and in the public interest. And we're not getting any of that at the moment. The Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act, it provides that municipalities are not exempt from ensuring that local contracts align with the provincial standards for animal care and protection. Without oversight, we don't know who monitors this, what the interpreted findings are, or what we need to do about these things. The further provincial legislation is with the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporate Act. And the contracting of a municipality with a nonprofit does not exempt a municipality from oversight. In fact, it creates a shared responsibility to ensure public funds are being used appropriately. The organization is in legal compliance, and the community members' rights, include those nonprofit members, are upheld. My greatest concern is with the funds that are being appropriated to the Humane Society, as there is no accountability whatsoever. Failure to ensure compliance may have legal consequences. Even unintentional involvement where public funds are used in a manner that enriches or allows the misappropriation of charitable funds may be in violation of provincial law. It may expose the municipality to liability, particularly if they're aware of the violations but took no corrective action. The laws were not written as suggestions. They outline the duty of the care that applies even when the services are outsourced. Your own Ontario Municipal Councillor's Guide sets out the procedures for they call it the quasi-judicial legislative powers. And even when the services are contracted out, it states very clearly municipal councils remain accountable for ensuring proper governance, transparency, and public oversight. Locally, we have our own Port Hope bylaws, bylaw 27 and 60 of 2022, and there are others. They set out the agreement with the Humane Society to provide municipality with certain animal control services. None of those are being reported back on to the municipality or to the public. Of bylaw 27, part 4, section A provides that all applicable standards should be upheld. But we don't know, nobody knows telling us what those standards are or if they're meeting them. The Ministry of the Solicitor General has produced just in January an animal welfare services shelter standards. And I question whether or not that's actually being assessed and put into play with our shelter. Part 4, again, section B, sets out the hours of the operation. I don't know if you know, June till July in 2024, the shelter closed its doors to incoming animals. You're paying for that, or I take it you're paying for that. They didn't give you a refund for all those closed, you know, that over a month when they were closed, or what happened to those animals during that time. When I spoke to the chairperson of that board, she seemed oblivious to any knowledge of the shelter being closed or how often it happens, and simply being open would be a good thing for them to do. Section 8 sets out that they need to participate in community activities to promote education and understanding. Well, I've been to a number of community activities in Port Hope. I've never seen the Humane Society there. They have conducted their own private fundraisers and such, but they're not community participants. They have no partnerships. They don't work with the other vets in the area. They're limited to one. There is no partnership. Section 5 sets out that their staff is to search and confine for suspected rabid animals. Their job qualifications don't even require a tetanus vaccine. There's no health and safety set out for those people for handling those animals. They don't even conduct a police check for staff or volunteers. One of the duties of an entry-level animal care attendant, the duties include administering vaccinations to the animals, which is contrary to the Veterinary Practices Act in Ontario regulations. They need to be under specific supervising by the vets. Part 7, section A and B sets out the periodic reports. Now, I did get through an FOI a copy of some stray reports. Half of the stray reports, the information was incomplete. There was no assessment of the content of those reports. The information was put in wrong fields, and it's an effort and futility that they're doing this. I had asked for what some of the definitions of their headers meant, and they couldn't tell me. When I met with the board chair in October of 2024, along with 2 directors, I was specifically, adamantly, and categorically stated that staff do not engage in any animal control duties. That's not what your bylaw agreement says. So I don't know who's taking care of that for you. Let's see. But that's a dangerous position to put these mostly kids in to go and get these animals. I've made requests for basic financial transparency, but I've been declined or deflected at every corner. And these should be public information through the Ontario Nonprofit Act. But there's no way, there's no tribunal for me to go to say, okay, Humane Society needs to comply with the other provincial laws, which makes a partnership with the municipality. It's a shared responsibility. Let's see, the concerns haven't been isolated or vague. They've been specific, they're well documented, and I've delivered those in good faith. The lack of response isn't just disappointing, it undermines the credibility of the entire governance structure. I've brought numerous discrepancies to their attention, yet no attention or explanation is shared. Some discrepancies are as high as a $50,000 shortfall. So I'm going to recap. The bylaws aren't being followed. There's closure of the shelter. There's financial anomalies. There's no presence at community events. There's retaliation against their members. I've been terminated for asking questions. They claim that they don't get any government funding, but obviously they do. That's on their brochures as well as on their website, that they claim not to get any government funding, which is in bad faith. Non-existent programs, they say in their annual general meeting that they have a spay-neuter program. It's on there, but 2003, there were zero benefits. No one benefited from this program, so they don't have this program. I even proposed to them another model that they could follow, and I was told by email that maybe another organization could take this on. And yet, a few months later, they were here asking for funds.
Thank you, Sue. That's
anyway.
time twice,
Yep,
so.
no, that's okay. That's the gist of it.
Okay,
I
thank you.
need your help.
Thank you very much for coming forward. Thank you very much for your delegation. I will turn it to the council table for any questions or comments. Councillor Less.
Hi, Mary. Nice to see you again, too.
Yes, thank you very much. Les has been a great supporter. I appreciate him.
Thank you. So as a result of the information you provided us in your speaker notes
Yes.
prior to this meeting, Director Gilmer reached out to the Animal Society, and we were to set up a meeting. It could have occurred on Friday, but Deputy Mayor Vicky and I already had commitments, so we're hoping to schedule it when Director Gilmer gets back to try and get, as you can tell, the audience can tell, it's quite a complex issue. There's a lot of things in here that we have to check and verify. On the financial part, it's just, I know, a very small part of this. We, as somebody that contracts services, do not have the ability to go in and audit their books, check their books. Now, yes, they have to provide financial statements, but that's more from CRA point of view as opposed from our point of view. So we really don't know what type of ground we're on. Anyways, and I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Vicky. I think she has some comments too.
I assume you have some comments, Deputy Mayor.
Well, since Les says so, thank you. So thank you, Mary, for your presentation. And just, I think many people here know that I had been a volunteer at the Humane Society for many years in many capacities, almost at a full-time capacity for a while. So I was very familiar. That was about 15 years ago, the operations when it was its own identity and not Municipal Animal Services. So my questions, and I don't think these questions can be answered today, but since we transitioned to the new model, we don't get reports anymore. I feel as a counselor in this community, when people come to me telling me their problems with cats, dogs, whatever, I don't have any visibility into how it's functioning. I don't know how many cats are coming in, how many are getting adopted out, how many, the picture. I'm not seeing the picture anymore. It is concerning to me that there are closings, and I'm not aware of that. We've had TNR come here a few times. We've had people talk about strays. And I think it's important to note that when someone goes to surrender, when they're turned away, that stray didn't start off a stray. They've now become a stray because that person has no options. And that's my fear. We're heading into a community where we're going to have cat colonies. And that's way more expensive to manage once that becomes out of control than getting ahead of it now. So I understand, I appreciate, I think that we need more visibility. I'm surprised that since we transitioned to this new model, we haven't come back to kind of do a recap. What's working, what's not working? Do you need more money? Do you need something different? And I think we're at that, definitely at that stage now where we need to relook at it and see what needs to be fixed, what's working, what's not working. So.
Thank you. We're sorry. Did you want to?
No,
have
just
a-
as Les said, we're
yeah.
going to hopefully have a meeting and we'll discuss some of these. So some of these points.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from around the table? Okay, so this evening, the recommended motion is identified on the agenda, and it's to receive this delegation for information. So can I get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Lass, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you very much again. And at this point, we are going to have a 10-minute recess. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we are going to be reconvening. If I can get Councillor Pearson back at the table. We're going to be moving on to item number 7, which is the public comment period. So it's now time for the public comment period. If I can get everyone's attention, please. It is now time for the public comment period. As per our procedural bylaw, the purpose of the public comment period is for members of the public to provide comments on items that are on today's council agenda. If you have questions related to an item that is not on today's agenda, please wait until the question period, which is later in the meeting. I request that you keep your comments brief and be respectful. I also remind council members that no questions or comments can be directed to those providing public comments tonight. Please also ensure that you provide us with your name and contact details through the sign-in sheet that is near the door so that staff may follow up if necessary. Please remember you have 2 minutes to make your comments, and please come forward, state your name, and press the purple button to speak. We now open for public comments.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. Thank you very much. My name is Jason Schmidt. I am the past chair of the Northumberland Humane Society. I'm here to respond very briefly to Ms. Brown's delegation this evening and express the deep disappointment the Humane Society has at her delegation and her presentation. For context, Ms. Brown's comments this evening are the culmination of almost a year's campaign of disrespectful, abusive, and untrue communications that Ms. Brown has had with the Humane Society, with our community partners, and with our third-party fundraisers. We are deeply disappointed, and it is disrespectful to the effort and the hard work that the board of directors, who are unpaid volunteers, who spend an enormous amount of time in this organization and have very thoughtfully and diligently considered and implemented their obligations with respect to governance and the operations of the Humane Society. We are pleased to inform you that in April 2025, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Agribusiness conducted a surprise inspection of our shelter. And I am pleased to inform you that the inspector had no concerns and in fact found that we are in compliance with all of our regulations. The Humane Society takes umbrage with the words misappropriation of funds that Ms. Brown used this evening. We have audited financial statements to the contrary of that statement. With respect to Ms. Brown's comments about the shelter being closed, the shelter has been closed in the past year or so for a variety of reasons, one of which has to do with capacity. And if anyone follows the CBC, you will note that humane societies across the country are suffering due to capacity issues and regularly close. In addition, the Humane Society has closed due to respiratory illnesses in our cats' room, which means that we are closed for the betterment of animals and the safety regarding their health. The Humane Society is not closed with respect to our municipal animal services contract with Port Hope. We have complied with our municipal services contract. We provide quarterly reports to the staff of Port Hope. And in fact, I believe last week, we provided our year-end report. So that information is available and you can contact the staff member who is the liaison with the Humane Society. And in closing, I'm going to leave my comments there to remain respectful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Any other comments from the public? Anyone else want to come forward for any comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 8, correspondence. 8.1, Rebound Child and Youth Services regarding request to waive permit fees, 15 Cavan Street. I am bringing this forward for discussion, and so I'd like to hear from some of my other council members regarding this letter from Rebound. Councillor Clare.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this forward. I'm quite happy to support this request to facilitate the development and opening of the Youth Wellness Hub, which I think is a needed and welcomed new community asset. And I would say I think this is in keeping with some of the discussion we had a year ago around the hub and the desire for there to be a strong and positive relationship between the municipality and the new hub. I did have a question just to take the opportunity. One of the things that we did was to pass a resolution appointing a member of council to sit on the steering committee to act as a liaison. And I assume this is just the kind of thing that liaison may end up doing. And I wondered if you had any update on when the steering committee is going to be struck.
Well, thank you for that question. Well, first of all, I think the one thing I want to clarify is that the letter did not actually have the information of the specific ask. So I did reach out to our director, Desta, for clarification on that. And there were two parts of the permit that were being requested, but one part is a county council ask, and that's in relation to the plumbing permit. But the actual permit relief from the municipality, the amount that's being requested is $4,650.01. And I'm going to turn it over perhaps to you to just give us some clarification on other avenues that were being explored for this, just so that we have the fulsome context.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the request was processed through Development Services first, and we explored options for funding through the Community Improvement Plan. Right now, our Community Improvement Plan is applicable to this property since it's in the project area. And we do have a fees grant program through our CIP. However, that fees grant program is not a standalone program. So you would need to have approval under another program of our CIP in order to qualify for the fees grant program. So that was the first issue that arose there. We did explore options for additional program approval. We did run into some challenge with respect to funding of the project already. So there would have been that, and then plus having approval from the property owner to apply for the CIP. That would have been another step in the process, and this was quite a time-sensitive request. So ultimately, the CIP was not pursued as a funding option, but that was a discussion with Development Services.
Thank you for that. And I think Councillor Adam also had a question.
Yeah, I have no qualms with this at all. I think this benefits the community. We had a discussion about this a little bit earlier, and I had said that I wouldn't want this to be something that could potentially be for everybody in the future. Everybody coming saying, I would like a building permit waived as well. But speaking with the mayor about that. This is a community service. This is something that is to benefit the community. It's not for an individual, and I completely agree, and I think this is fantastic.
Councillor Todd.
Yeah, I agree. I think in terms of how this is, and especially the way in which it's framed, the CIP obviously is in play to do some of these funds. It's not a perfect system, but the spirit of it and the intention of it, I think, is at play, and I think that's where we need to support, which is this is a community improvement project, and so we should be improving it. So yes, I'm in favor of this for sure.
Okay, so thank you for the comments. I don't know if anybody else has anything further to add, but since I am, yes, Director Baxter.
So certainly understand the cause and the want. So just reminding our building division is a cost recovery division. They are short on revenues last year. We anticipate them to be quite challenging again this year. The other part for consideration is that there's no provision that I'm aware of for waiving fees under the Building Act, right? Other areas there isn't under the Building Act. I'm not an expert in it, but one hasn't been identified. Essentially then what this would become is a council donation or grant outside of your policy and process. So I just want that to be, aware from you. We would effectively be issuing them a refund check as if it was a council grant. It's not, they've done the work, right? They need to record the revenue. Otherwise, other people going to do building will end up having to make up that shortfall. So we wouldn't be waiving the fee. We would be reimbursing the fee through council funds.
Thank you, Director Baxter. And I just want to comment on that, and that is to just bring us back to another focus that we've discussed at this table, which is the monies that we receive from OPG for growth readiness. And part of those monies are specifically earmarked for developing the health and well-being of this community. And one of the things that we have also identified in our economic development plan as a barrier to economic development is the lack of mental health supports and services in this community. And something like the Youth Wellness Hub figures very squarely into that. Both of those places, both the economic development plan as well as the earmarking of OPG monies for this community to be growth ready. So we're in line with those two things as well. Councillor Adam, and then I see Councillor Less.
Well, actually, you basically just said what I was going to say, is that the potential for using the growth readiness, as well as Director Baxter, just quick question, if you can recall, during the grant portion of budget, we usually save some in case we have something else come up in the future. Do you remember if we saved any for this year? I don't recall.
I know we were under in donations by about $2,000.
And I didn't think that you would have it on the top of your head, but if you have that quick, good for you.
No, I know you approved 67,000. But I don't remember off the top of my head what the actual, I don't think it's in last year's report either. 2024 budget approved 194,000, 69 of which was for community grants. 67 was awarded. However, I'd have to go look at the budget. We typically align the budget to what you award.
Councillor Less and then Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, when we do start talking about the OPG money, once we have it, we should start pocketing that money and saying, okay, so much can go towards this type of thing. Other studies that we're going to have to be doing. So I think rather than just using it as a general catch-all, that we start defining how much of what is going to be happening.
Councillor Less, I think that's an excellent point, and I do believe that that is largely the intent of our strategic planning process that we're in the last stages of, and so hoping that we'll be able to address that through very specific KPIs as well. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So my thoughts are more along the lines of what the director has suggested. I think every week we've come here, we've talked about the Growth Readiness Fund and taken money from it, and it's making me very uncomfortable because I really have no visibility into how much we spent, what we have left over, what we want to use it for. I think if we find some funds in with the grant process, I think it's better aligned there and it can be tracked under there. I think that we have a lot of similar asks that come through that process, and I think that's the place it should be. And I guess the question to the director is if we decided to go down that path, would that be recorded along with the other grants that we gave for this year? Director Baxter?
It would come out of the same account. We've already posted who through the regular process as part of the budget was approved. I don't know that I would update that listing. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I
inquiring
mean,
about?
when it comes time next year, when we look at who we gave grants to last year, if it could be listed alongside that, because we're trying to track how often we give grants to the same organization.
Sure, yeah, we could identify that.
Thank you. And I think just actually one point that you made that really needs clarification is we absolutely know where we stand with the Growth Readiness Fund because the CAO brought forward a report to this council, and we unanimously supported spending up to a certain amount of that Growth Readiness Fund. So we absolutely know that we've received $1 million in December. We know what we have actually agreed to spending to date. We also know that there's going to be another contribution of Growth Readiness funds this year. So, we do actually know where we stand with that fund as of this particular moment. So there is visibility and there's clarity. And if the CAO can speak to that, I appreciate it.
Certainly. So I think in terms of what we have earmarked with the use of those funds based on the previous report provided to council was up to 500,000 for the initial studies that were identified to be required moving forward. And we used 25,000 of the funds previous for the work towards the strat plan that we were short. So 525,000, and then dependent on the notice of motion tonight with relation to the ward boundary review, I think there was $180,000 possibly earmarked. So if you look at sort of that, it looks like we're around just under 800,000 that's sort of been earmarked so far.
So I just wanted to make that point that we actually do have a very clear sense of where we stand. Deputy Mayor.
May I? And wasn't there also funds taken for the rural report as well? And then this one. So could I just get a total if we know? Can someone give me a total of what's been earmarked right now?
Certainly. I've just given the totals based on the reports that I had moving forward. If Director Baxter has the total with relation to the rural focus group delegation that was here when the motion was made to use some of those funds for that report, I think we were around 20,000. So again, still under the 800,000.
Thank you. So we have had, we've been very clear with how we've been spending the money. Okay, so I think we've heard from everybody around the table except for Councillor Darrell.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with everything that everybody said. I think this is obviously the community needs this. Mental health is very important. Some of the conversations I've had with people around the youth hub is the constant delays they faced. So I would like to see if we could put something together where we just do a little bit more than receive for information tonight and actually have some action on this to take away one more barrier off their plates.
And so this brings me back to what Councillor Clare was putting on the table. So just in terms of an update for both of you, as you know that this youth wellness hub in the community is part of a larger provincial youth wellness hub network. And so according to those that are overseeing all the youth wellness networks in the province, the network that is here headquartered, the hub that's headquartered here in Port Hope, is exceeding all the other new hubs that have been announced in the province in terms of progress, in terms of milestones, and in terms of how long it actually takes from the moment that funds are announced to the time where a building is physically opened and all the programs and services are operating in the wraparound way that is intended. And so we are exceeding all of the milestones, as I understand it, from the service organizations that are leading this initiatives, and in particular Rebound, that is the lead organization. The hub was supposed to be opened officially June 27th. As I understand it, there have been a few construction delays that are being addressed, or that attempts are to address it. This is no different than many other projects that experience delays, both at the municipal level and at the county level, but I know that there's great oversight on this and great commitment by all of those involved to ensure that those physical doors open as soon as possible. In the meantime, Rebound, the lead organization, is going to be putting out a public comment and document that will be enumerating all of the services that are going to be offered before the doors are officially open, both virtually and in locations close to the physical hub here in Port Hope. So the work continues to move forward. So I appreciate that folks are wondering why the doors haven't opened, but I just wanted to provide that for context, and I appreciate your comment about the barrier. And back to your point, Councillor Clare, as soon as those physical doors are open, I believe that the governance structure is going to be changing somewhat. It's a little bit different than what was originally contemplated in the proposal, but as soon as those doors are open, I'm anticipating there's going to be a difference in how things are running from the CPT to a steering committee, et cetera. And I will definitely keep everybody apprised. Okay. Okay, so with that, Councillor Clare.
I'd like to bring forward a motion, an alternative motion to receiving for information, if I can. That the correspondence from Rebound Child and Youth Services regarding the request to waive permit fees at 15 Cavan Street be received, and that staff be directed to reimburse the building permit fees to the requester as requested in the correspondence, and that council approve the use of the municipality's Growth Readiness Fund to finance this request.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. Does anybody want to second that motion? Councillor Darrell, any further conversation, comments? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor? Thank you, and that is passed. Any other correspondence that, yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I received a correspondence yesterday morning regarding the Bill 5 Protecting Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act 2025. And in it, there's part of it is replacing the Endangered Species Act with a special economic zone policy. And it's too late to have this on the agenda. The question period and feedback period is closed. It closed on May 17th. And this will be coming to, I believe, the legislature on May 22nd and May 26th. So we have an option to wait and bring it forward, follow procedure and bring it forward at the next council meeting, but that is not until June. So I guess I wanted to ask council around the table if there's any interest in suspending procedure and discussing whether we wanted to talk about this and take a stance now before it proceeds at the province.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to actually just turn it over to the CAO with whom I have discussed this matter for some clarification, because I think that actually Right now, we're in public meetings between the 22nd and the 26th, but I'm just going to ask her to comment on this because I think you had some feedback on just the timing and at what part of processes municipalities participate in, et cetera.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm cautious about suspending the rules for something that is not time sensitive. I do understand that the commenting period closed on May 17th. I also want to reiterate that I think it only received second reading, so it was only circulated May 1st. So there hasn't been a lot of time, which is not unusual, unfortunately, when they start to change the acts and circulate for comment. And so it's now just going to public hearing, and not very often do municipalities participate in public hearings. And I think that there's certainly still an ability to provide comments or support with relation to concerns around the act. That continues to happen all the time. I think we saw the same thing happen with strong mayor powers when there was conversation around council wanting to put something forward with advocacy against strong mayor powers. The commenting period had closed, but we're certainly still seeing those come forward. Council still has an opportunity to provide those comments. So just in the interest of that, I think I would be cautious about suspending the rules at this point. I still think you have the ability to bring it forward. It gives you a chance to, again, review and look at what those changes are. And it also allows staff some time to know that that is an interest for council. That's something that council may want to advocate for or support Chatham-Kent with the previous correspondence that's been received. And it allows staff to take a fulsome review as to, is there an impact to what we have in Port Hope, or should we just be supporting our neighbors with relation to their request? So just from that interest, I would encourage that you just move it forward for the next meeting.
Councillor Clare.
I just, can I just ask for a clarification? So I know we use the term suspending the rules, but there is in fact provision in our procedural bylaw to do this so that we can be responding in a timely way and not bound by waiting for a month every time. So I just, for the public, this is maybe suspension of rules, but it's really just adopting another rule that enables us to do this. And I'm not sure, in terms of the timeliness, I think, yes, we're always able to, say, hey, we oppose something even once it's passed. I think weighing in on something prior to it being passed in the legislature is probably more effective than just, stating our opinion after the fact. And I would remind council as well that I appreciate the comment around staff, but we have many times received correspondence and passed motions in support of other motions from other municipalities without having a staff report on the implications. For this particular one, I can also speak to, this has been discussed at the last 2 Environmental Advisory Committee meetings in which those members of the community have expressed significant concerns. And we've had some discussion about this already. Roma, AMO, and many other watchdogs and reviewers have provided lots of public comment around the implications of this. And for me, that suffices to inform, how I would participate in a discussion about this item this evening. And I would feel comfortable moving forward with that this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. I just saw your hand go up, so I just wanted to.
Just wanted to clarify that I certainly agree in terms of whether it's a support motion for other municipalities is different than whether or not it's a direct resolution from this council for the impact on Port Hope, because staff haven't had a chance to review that. So if the intent is to bring forward the motion to support the correspondence received, then that's fine. And again, I only reiterate around the rules of procedure just because you don't want to get into the habit where you're constantly suspending the rules. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to have the procedural bylaw. But certainly, definitely of interest in terms of matters that are time sensitive, of course. But just some thought around that.
Thank you. So actually, maybe just can we get some clarification from the deputy mayor then in terms of the intention? Is it to support the correspondence, or is it to have something specific for the municipality, just as per the CAO's comments, just to be able to be very clear?
Thank you. So this came to me quite quickly. So I'm still trying to understand what is the best option for our municipality, and I've heard a few different views on it. So at this point, I'm really looking for what would be the best option for Port Hope to be heard and take a stance on it, and that where council can have that discussion. That's where I am at this point.
Councillor Todd and then Councillor Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm curious as well. So, appreciating that first reading's done, when is the best time for us to weigh in? Is that second reading, third reading? Like, because there's still opportunity for municipalities to submit. Do we typically do that after second reading?
No. So when the information comes forward, and like you said, we've received correspondence, but with relation to whether there's an impact to Port Hope, that isn't yet to be reviewed. It just got circulated. It got reading on May 1st was the second reading, I believe. And so some information has now come forward. So when we looked today in terms of the only question or the only thing I reviewed today was whether the rules needed to be suspended in order to bring this forward. When I looked at it, the commenting period had already closed. May 17th was when that closed. So just in terms of whether there's an urgency, that period had already closed. So in my opinion, again, depends on whether or not we're going to be supporting the correspondence as received. It was just a motion for support. Or if you're going to make a motion specific to Port Hope, I would ask that you allow staff some time to review that to see what those impacts are so that council can make a better informed motion to bring that forward to the province with those concerns.
Councillor Adam.
Yeah, so basically all I was going to say is that I realized that the correspondence has come over to you. I don't even know what this correspondence is. I've never seen this. This is my first hearing of this at all. Even if we suspended the rules, which it's fine, I don't know if I can support something that I'm learning right there without any other background information.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. I want to make sure we hear from everybody. Does Councillor Less or Councillor Darrell want to weigh in on this at all?
I just think we should be trying to take as many proactive stances as we can, just whether it's just to support it on the municipality level until staff has a chance to look into it farther.
Councillor Darrell and Councillor Less?
I agree with Councillor Darrell, and I don't think we'll have any effect by trying to nail it down tonight. So I don't see how that would be applicable.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, so just to answer Councillor Adams' question, and that is the problem, I haven't been able to share it. So, and that's, I guess, the question to the CAO. My options tonight, would it just be to do nothing and it would be brought back, or would I share it and then we...
So really the issue and the reason why the rules needed to be suspended is that this was information that was provided to council through the Council Information Index. So council had an opportunity to bring it forward prior to the agenda preparation. That didn't occur. So the rules to suspend is because the agenda was already prepared and it wasn't brought forward. It's being asked to be brought forward after the agenda has been prepared. So it is in your Council Information Index. So council has an opportunity to review that correspondence and the proposed resolution that's been attached from, there's two letters of correspondence, one from Orangeville and one from Chatham-Kent, looking for support around that. And because we hadn't heard anything from council with relation to that, it wasn't brought forward. So it is there, and I think that's the process. Shrishma?
I do want to also add to what the CAO is saying is that our typical process for correspondence, this was provided through the CII just last week. Our typical process for correspondence is for it to come forward at Committee of the Whole meeting and then considered at the next the next council meeting. So that's one thing I just wanted to clarify, that would be our normal process.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further discussion of this? Councillor Clare.
I appreciate all the comments. I wonder though, what is the harm today of putting it up on the screen? I mean, that's essentially what we would be voting to do today. And if we feel we need more information, then we can always bring it back, in June with additional information. But it's entirely possible that it goes up on the screen. It aligns with what we've all already read in the news about this and have thought about on our own, and we're comfortable discussing.
I'm going to turn it over to the clerk.
So the reason that the rules need to be suspended is because this item was not on the agenda. So notice provisions with respect to this item have not been provided. People have not had an opportunity to review the item, as council has also not had that opportunity. And so that is the reason that prior to discussing the issue, the rules would have to be suspended in order to bring it forward.
Thank you to the clerk. So do you want to put a motion on the table to suspend the rules, or does Deputy Mayor want to, since she brought it forward?
Well, Claire had her hand up, so I'll let her speak.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. My question was not actually, I could fully understand the procedural bylaw. My comment was actually directed at my colleagues at the council table and saying to you all, what would be the harm in voting to put it on the screen? It doesn't mean we have to do anything with it this evening. And so, yeah, I would want to I would be comfortable bringing forward a motion or supporting a motion from the Deputy Mayor.
So just for process clarity issues to the clerk, would we first need to suspend the rules in order to bring that up? And so if that's the case, my question still remains. Would the Deputy Mayor or Councillor Claire want to move and second the suspension?
Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, one thing I just want to highlight is that with a motion to suspend the rules, it has to be carried by a 2/3 vote. So 5 people would have to vote yea.
Okay, so do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. So I don't know for sure if this is right, but I would like to move that we suspend procedure so that we may review responsible growth in opposition to elements of Bill 5.
Correspondence.
Correspondence. Thank you.
And Councillor Claire is seconding. Any further discussion on this matter? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor? That is passed. And now we will have a look.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry.
Just for clarity, this is the letter that was in the index.
That's correct, yes.
This is not the letter that the Deputy Mayor was referring to.
That's correct. I do have that wording, Deputy Mayor, if you wish to have that one there, but this was the letter that was received through the CII. There were 2, yes. I just pulled one up. The Orangeville one? Okay, I can pull that one up.
Okay, so we have it up on the screen. Yeah, did you go ahead?
Okay, so this is the correspondence that was also sent to me. So it's a motion responsible growth in opposition to elements of Bill 5, whereas the Government of Ontario has introduced Bill 5, Protecting Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act 2025, which proposes substantial changes to environmental planning policies, including replacing the Endangered Species Act with a new framework that reduces protections for at-risk species and enabling the creation of special economic zones that may override the local planning authority and environmental oversight. And whereas the municipality of Port Hope supports increasing housing supply and economic growth, but believes this must be done in a way that upholds environmental responsibility and maintains the integrity of local planning processes. And whereas Bill 5 as proposed, weakens safeguards for natural heritage systems, threatening biodiversity and diminishing the authority of municipalities to manage growth in accordance with local needs and official plans. And whereas the Canadian Environmental Law Association submits that all of the Bill 5 schedules, with minor exceptions, should be withdrawn and not further considered by the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Until they are substantially modified to ensure robust protection for the environment, human health, and vulnerable members of the Ontario public, including Indigenous peoples who may otherwise be harmed by the amendments contained within the various schedules. And whereas the Canadian And whereas the Canadian Civil Liberties find that Schedule 9, in allowing the Minister of Economic Development to exempt trusted proponents from compliance with municipal and provincial law within the special economic zones, promotes abandonment of the rule of law, subjecting Ontario lands and peoples to the possibility of arbitrary and non-transparent decision-making, and effectively nullifying decades of legacy lawmaking in those zones. And whereas Amnesty International Canada urges the government of Ontario to 1, immediately halt or withdraw Bill 5, 2, recommit to upholding the rights of Indigenous peoples as affirmed in Canadian law through the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and 3, engage in transparent, inclusive consultations with Indigenous nations and civil society before tabling new development legislations. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council for the Municipality of Port Hope 1, opposes all provisions in Bill 5 that reduce environmental protections in Ontario, proud legacy and protections of endangered species that override the rule of law and that nullify municipal planning authority. 2, urges the province of Ontario to support housing and infrastructure development in ways that align with sound environmental planning and wildlife protection that empower municipalities with appropriate planning tools. And 3, directs that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Honorable Stephen Lecce, Minister of Energy and Mines, the Honorable Rob Flack, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Honorable Todd J. McCarthy, Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, the Honorable Graham McGregor, Minister of Citizenship and Multiculturalism, the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Associations of the Municipalities of Ontario, and all Ontario municipalities.
Thank you to the Deputy Mayor. I just want to comment again, trying to find a middle line between what we heard from the CAO and the importance of this issue. I'd be a lot more comfortable if we were supporting something that had come to us via correspondence rather than inserting the municipality in here, especially because our staff hasn't had an opportunity to weigh on this and comment on it. So that's just my perspective on it. Any further thoughts or comments on this, Councillor Clare?
Yeah, sorry, this is for the Deputy Mayor. If you could clarify, my understanding was that we were going to be looking at the correspondence that had been included in the CII, so the one from the town of Orangeville, which I noticed the language is very similar, but it's a lot shorter than what you just read out.
Yeah, that's why I questioned partway through. I'm like, am I doing exactly the same one? So I assume that some of these are going out by other municipalities as well. So there was some blank lines in there where it said Municipality of Port Hope. So anyway.
Sir Adam.
So this goes back to my question earlier. It wasn't the fact that the stuff wasn't in the CII, but I have never seen this before, which means, and I'm going to tell you right now, as you're reading it out, I can't remember part of this stuff. I still haven't actually had an opportunity to thoroughly go through it to make a decision on something, and I refuse to make decisions on things that I have not been able to thoroughly investigate. So,
thank you, Councillor Adam. Councillor Les?
I agree with Councillor Adam. I mean, we're doing this on the fly. We don't know the background, the history, or anything, what is behind all this, and what are the ramifications. And this may be very good, or it may not. So I would hesitate to do something like this and make a motion and then start voting on this.
Councillor Clare?
Yeah, I hear that. I think especially given there is a lot more in the proposed motion that was shared by the Deputy Mayor. Again, my understanding at first was that we were talking about this correspondence from Orangeville, which I would feel very comfortable supporting. I do just want to make a comment. I am a bit disturbed by the suggestion that this is completely new to members of council, this is a bill that has been all over the news. It's been all over every communication we receive from various municipal associations. It has huge implications for planning and for environmental protection in Ontario and impacts for the municipality. So I would really like to think that we are all keeping somewhat up to speed on these developments that impact the municipality beyond just the information that we're receiving in staff reports. So I think it is on our radar as members of council that this is coming down, and I hope we're all reading about it and thinking about it as part of our work.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. And I don't think that it's a zero-sum game here in terms of just because it might be on our radar, or we might be aware, or it's been discussed at the environmental committee. Still, the bottom line is that we haven't had a staff report on this, and we haven't had a robust discussion or debate at this council table on the issue. And I do think it's also true that folks aren't always privy to the same information or have the same time to spend on all the different issues and files that are coming at us every single day and every single week. So going back to my comment is, you know, I think we have to distinguish, like, what are we supporting? Are we supporting a motion that is a Port Hope motion, or are you asking us to contemplate supporting a motion that has, or support a letter or correspondence that's come from another municipality?
Just to go back to where I opened, I received this information. I received a request to bring this forward from the community. I was under the understanding that that we still had a time frame to submit something, and then I just learned literally before council meeting started that window closed on May 17th. So I was bringing this forward to this council to ask if you wanted to discuss it at this time or carry it over to June. So I'm not married to any commitment here. I know I'm throwing this here and in front of everybody at this time. So I was just asking everybody for their input. That was my intention.
But I think it would still help to know what we're contemplating in terms of a potential moving forward out of where we are in the current discussion.
Yeah, so I think this is something, in my opinion, that we should support. I think it aligns with a lot of what we have done. One of our first orders of business of this council was our environmental declaration that we made. We are supporting, we did support a sub-watershed study, and we have seen, I think, in Osaka, a lot of compliance with the developers there, and I think that kind of goes hand in hand. We have the Climate Change Action Plan, which we're currently in the works for. So I think a lot of what we have decided as a council is aligned with what's proposed in here. So as far as bringing this back in June with staff's recommendations, that's fine. I don't know if I need to make a motion now to do that, though. So.
And thank you for bringing up the track record of council with both the declaration of the climate emergency and UNDRIP, and do actually want to remind everybody that we did not suspend the rules for passing that first motion around the climate emergency. So we're either consistent or not in our approaches to processes. So any further thoughts or comments on this? Okay, so how do folks want to move forward? Clerk, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So in this case, I think there is some confusion from staff's perspective with respect to what the expectation would be for the June meeting. Typically, in a situation such as this, what would happen is that you could request at this time to bring forward the correspondence from the City of Orangeville to the Committee of the Whole meeting for further discussion. And that would be following our regular process. We could certainly do that. But you know, if there's specific direction that you want to give to staff tonight with respect to this matter, then we would need that to be detailed and provided. Thank you.
Okay, so turning it, Councillor Adam.
Thank you. So I'd actually appreciate, just before you had a chance to say if you wanted the Orangeville or whatever, I would appreciate that your motion come to the next one, because I believe that it is something that is more fitting to Port Hope I just would want time to actually review it before I said yes to it. That's all. So that's what I would appreciate, is if you brought forth this one.
Any further thoughts or comments on that? So, Councillor Clare.
If it's amenable to the deputy mayor, I would be happy to work with you between now and the June cycle to bring forward this language as a notice of motion.
Sure. So I'd ask the clerk, would that be a good option that you would recommend?
Absolutely. It is under council's purview to bring this forward as a notice of motion at the next committee of the whole meeting on June 3rd. Yeah.
Okay. Duly noted. Moving on to item number 9, our consent agenda, adoption of minutes. Items listed under the consent agenda are considered collectively as one motion. Council members may request that specific items be removed for separate discussion, deliberation, and action. The consent items are listed on the agenda. Would any member of council like to remove any of these items for separate discussion, 9.1 through 9.5? Seeing none, can I please get a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes as listed? Moved by Councillor Todd, second by Councillor Adam. All in favor? That is passed. Moving on to item number 10, consent agenda advisory committee and board meetings. Would anyone like to remove any of the items under this consent agenda for separate discussion, 10.1 through to 10.10? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to pull out 10.10, the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority minutes.
Okay, thank you. Any other minutes to be pulled? Okay, then the floor is yours.
So I just wanted to pull something up here. So I just wanted to mention one item on there, which was the budget that last year I actually brought a copy of the budget. Nice glossy budget with lots of pictures. I just want to clarify that the budget that was presented to the board, that's not the levy. The discussions about funding for stewardship programs and the levy, that's all done in the fall. And the levy is passed by weighted recorded vote at that time. But I just wanted to talk, if people would just bear with me for a minute, just a little bit about the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority, because I do get a lot of comments that come, and there's never a time to answer those questions. There's comments about that I've heard, why doesn't the GRCA have local community members on the board as opposed to people from the different municipalities? Why don't we see discussion about salmon fishing on the agenda? Adam and Vicky are on the board. What do they want to do with the File Factory property? The agenda is too short. Is there something missing? So I just want to just briefly answer a couple of those questions. I won't take too much time, but I just want to I just have something written here, that the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority is one of Ontario's conservation authorities mandated by the province to carry out specific responsibilities, primarily floodplain management and source water protection. As a member of the Conservation Ontario, GRCA represents the entire watershed, which spans multiple municipalities, including forest, fields, valleys, grasslands, creeks, lakes, shorelines, beyond the forest and the river. And I think sometimes we focus that we have the river here, and that's the extent of the watershed. Board membership is provincially mandated. It's recreationally, whereas the Recreational User Committee includes appointed community members. Board meetings are open to the public. Recordings are available online. The public may ask questions about any agenda items by registering in advance. Meetings are focused, with all items fulfilling a purpose or provincial requirement. Board members approve policy, but we don't oversee the operations. On issues such as the File Factory, salmon fishing, cell towers, all these very controversial topics, the GRCA only provides input when they're formally asked or contracted to. The organization uses advanced tools such as LiDAR, sonar, and GIS to deliver data-driven recommendations. So I just wanted to let everybody just give more insight to what they do. It's not a committee of council. The meetings have intention and purpose. They are short and to the point, but that doesn't mean that we're not delivering business. It just means that we're moving business. If anybody would like any more information, you're always welcome to attend a board meeting. We're very lucky that the administrative office is right here up the road from us. You can visit the GRCA website. You can contact myself or Adam, or go right into the office and ask any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further comments or thoughts on that? Anything else for folks to pull? If not, the recommended motion is on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder to receive these items? Councillor Leslie is going to move it, and Councillor Adams is going to second. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Before we move on to item number 11, items for consideration, I just want to turn it over to the clerk for the error in the minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So there was an error in the Madam Mayor's minutes with respect to her conflict of interest for item 11.1. It was related to a matter that was on another agenda. So I would just like to note that she did confirm with me, following that discussion, and I would just like to apologize for the oversight.
No worries, I'm very compliant to reading the notes in front of me. So items for consideration, 11.1, report CS 1125, Report Hope Public Library Board and Civic Awards Advisory Committee appointments. Does staff have anything further they would like to add before we consider this item?
Not at this time, Madam Mayor. It is a straightforward report. We have brought previous reports like this to the council meeting directly. It is an appointment in accordance with our advisory committee bylaw and appointment policy.
Thank you very much. And of course, thank you to everybody who comes forward for these positions within the municipality. Councillor Adam.
Thank you, and I just want to thank Siobhan Klusterhoff from the Chamber of Commerce, who has sat with the Civic Awards Committee and now is being replaced by Sherry, and we really appreciate her volunteerism on that committee.
Absolutely. And so the recommended motion is listed on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder for this? Moved by Councillor Clare, seconded by Councillor Adam. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Moving on to 11.2, report ES 0825, re-membership to the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. Does staff have anything further they would like to add before we consider this item? I noticed that our Director of Environmental Services is not here. Does the CAO want to comment on this at all?
No, I've read the report. I don't have any concerns.
So the recommended motion is listed on the agenda. Is there a mover and seconder for this? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Less. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. I do want to comment on this, saying that I think we're a little late getting to this table. It's a wonderful opportunity to network internationally and also to potentially access some much needed funds for not only Lake Ontario, but the Port of Port Hope. So very important group to be part of. So thank you for supporting that. 11.3, report PS 0725, municipal law enforcement officers appointment, summer student. Does staff have anything further they would like to add before we consider this item?
Just a quick comment, Madam Mayor, through you to council. This is just a standard bylaw that we bring forth anytime we bring on a bylaw officer. We need council's approval to appoint this bylaw officer so we can, so she can enforce our bylaws. We were lucky enough to get some grant funding for this, and we've offset the costs of the remainder of her salary in the budget. So if you have any questions, please feel free.
Thank you very much. The recommended motion is on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder for this? Moved by Councillor Todd, seconded by Councillor Adam. Any further discussion? All in favor? That is passed. Thank you very much for that update. 11.4, report WE 0525, Housing Enabling Core Services Transfer Payment Agreement for Victoria Street South reconstruction. Does staff have anything further they would like to add before we consider this item?
Just that we're very excited to announce that we were successful in securing a grant from the Housing Enabling Core Infrastructure Fund in the amount of just over $872,000 towards the Victoria Street reconstruction project.
Thank you very much. And how much short are we then on all the funds required for that project?
So it's still about $2 million.
Still $2 million. Okay, thank you. Is there a mover and seconder for the recommended motion on the agenda? Councillor Darrell, seconded by Councillor Clare. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Congratulations on that, by the way. 11.5, report PS 0825, report Hope Fire and Emergency Services, emergency procurement. Does staff anything further they would like to add before we consider this item? CEO.
Thank you. Again, just a reminder that as per the report, there was a fire that took place. Some fire gear was damaged during the course of that fire, and so it needs to be replaced. So again, I think this is just moving this forward so we can move forward with the procurement process in order to obtain the equipment that needs to be replaced. And I think it will probably come out at net zero cost. It's also been submitted back to the proponent to cover that cost under their insurance. So. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Can I get a mover and seconder for the recommended motion? Moved by Councillor Les, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? And that is passed. Moving on to item number 12, committee reports and recommendations. 12.1, motion from Committee of the Whole meeting of May 6, 2025 regarding answers to rural focus group questions from delegation to council, April 22nd, 2025. Is there anything further anyone would like to add before we vote on the matter? Councillor Les.
I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the answers, but I still don't think we have it crystallized. I think there's some work we have to do with the people that are looking at the 25 years of taxes, the review we're doing, and I think that will start rounding out things. So I don't, although we're presenting it, we're recommending we receive it, I don't think it's a complete answer yet.
Thank you, Councillor Les. Any further questions or comments around the table? I want to thank Councillor Darrell for bringing that forward at our last meeting to highlight the fact that the answers were provided in the time period that were requested by staff, and this is an ongoing project, and we thank Director Baxter for all of his efforts in responding to those questions. So the recommended motion is listed on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Todd, seconded by Councillor Les. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on to item 12.2, motion from Committee of the Whole meeting of May 6, 2025. Council considered staff report CS 0925 regarding appointment of 2 youth councillors and amendment to the terms of reference. Is there anything anyone would like to add before we vote on the matter, other than this is a fantastic thing for the council? Yes, Councillor Clare.
Yes, fantastic. And I noticed we've been so long-winded tonight that we've lost one of them who was with us for the first 2 hours. But I did want to ask, just take the opportunity to ask if staff could provide an update on the next steps for onboarding our new colleagues and when we might begin to hear from them at council, and any other pieces around connecting them with other youth groups or that to support their work.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Holloway Wadwani. In terms of next steps, what will happen is that if this report does go through, we will be contacting our new youth councillors in order to set up an onboarding meeting. In that meeting, we will go through their roles and responsibilities, and then we will also be setting up any meetings that we want to take with staff. The youth councillors, the first time that they will come to council will be at the June 17th meeting. So there will be a report from the youth councillors at that meeting. I don't foresee that having a lot of information. Likely they'll be introducing themselves and telling you a little bit about themselves. And then I anticipate that following that, they will start doing some work in the community with respect to their municipal responsibilities.
Thank you for that. So the recommended motion is on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? And that is passed with a lot of enthusiasm. Moving on to 12.3, motion from Committee of the Whole meeting of May 6, 2025 regarding report DS 0825 re-recommendation report draft plan of subdivision SU 01-2023-5868, County Road 65. Is there anything further that anyone would like to add before we vote on this matter? Councillor Less.
Yeah, I may not have asked the question correctly last meeting of the fire chief. There is only one exit in and exit out, Street A. Is that an issue for the subdivision? I mean, is this pretty common that?
Yes. Not to speak outside of my area of expertise, but just in my experience, it's a much higher unit count that would require two egresses from the subdivision. So it's my understanding that based on the number of units being proposed in this subdivision, that the existing singular ingress egress would be appropriate.
Thank you. Asked and answered.
Any other questions? Okay, the recommended motion is on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Less, seconded by Councillor Adam. All in favor? And that is passed. And at this point, we are going to take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. The item on the agenda. Moved by Councillor Adam, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? That is passed. Moving on to 12.5, motion from Committee of the Whole meeting of May 6, 2025 regarding report CS 1025 re-weighted voting. Is there anything further that anyone would like to add before we vote on this matter? Councillor Less.
I'd just like to point out that this is an extensive report that has recommended that we stick with the weighted voting the way it is. There is no other municipality that has extended weighted voting beyond what we have. In fact, we're probably one of the few people that have weighted voting. And in context of the notice of motion coming up in terms of weighted voting and strong mayor power and boundary changes, this reflects a concern of our rural residents about taxation issues and budget issues that don't really warrant us changing weighted voting at this stage until we have the fulsome report. So I just want to start that off before we get into the notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Less. Any other comments or from the around the table? I do have a question back to staff, and that is that I think we had received a very effective summary of that report in an AI discussion format. And I'm wondering whether or not it would be possible to refine that and have it available to the public so that it would be available in very simple, digestible terms, and that it just really emphasizes as well that this report was based on two separate legal opinions, just to clarify that we've already done that report. We paid for two separate legal opinions, and this is the outcome of that report, not just having it in the report format, but having it in that animated AI format that's so easy to understand.
Yes, certainly. I do think that was a great summary of sort of what the report was, that was very easy to listen to. And I think the intent is to place it on the website. I'll follow up with the Director of Corporate Services to inquire about that, but I believe that was the intent.
Thank you. So the recommended motion is on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Less, seconded by Councillor Adam. All in favor? Thank you. That is passed. Moving on to 12.6, motion from Committee of the Whole meeting of May 6, 2025 regarding report PRC 03525, re-update to the Parks, Recreation and Culture ICE allocation policy. Is there anything further that anybody would like to, add before we vote on the matter? Seeing none, the recommended action is on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Clare, seconded by Councillor Adam. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on to item 12.7, motion from Committee of the Whole meeting of May 6, 2025 regarding ward boundary and council composition review. Is there anything further that anyone would like to add before we vote on this matter? Councillor Todd.
Thank you very much. I've got a friendly amendment to it. There's actually two areas that I want to draw council's attention to. The first one is early on in the notice of motion, we originally had a deadline there of no later than May 30th, 2025. And what I'm recommending is we switch it to within 30 days. This is giving recognition that this notice came forward 2 weeks ago. And now we're 2 weeks later. Keeping it at May 30th is going to be a stretch. Within 30 days makes this more doable, and it puts us back into what would have been the original timeline when we originally looked this at Committee of the Whole. Further down at the last paragraph, I'm suggesting that we amend this simply because of clarification. If you recall, during Committee of the Whole, we had a very robust conversation about the wording on this. Is it clear? Is it not clear? So my recommended amendment to this is, and that the integrity and independence of the consultant's methodology and process be upheld, with the final report and recommendations from Watson Associate Economists Limited be presented to council for consideration as soon as practical, then enacted by council no later than September 30th, 2026. The changes in this reflect the fact that the process is the process, that the consultant will come back to council as soon as practical. And the reason that date is in there is it puts the motion of moving it forward still in this council. So it puts us on us as to whether or not we adopt it by the 2026 or by the 2030 election, depending on what comes back from the consultants and the time in which they come back. But this, I think, clearly states that it's over to the consultants to be able to do the process the way the process is intended, because I know there was concern that this was going to be, I think, sped through or so on. So anyways, those are the recommended changes. I get to move it. Someone else has to second it, though. Is that right?
I'll second it, but I was just wondering if, for the matter of discussion here around the table, if you could just take us back, because it's been a couple of weeks. And I think there's just been a lot of discussion around all the different motions that have come forward, and a lot of misinformation around the distinction between the motions that we've discussed at this table. And so if we just look at this one particular motion, can you just clarify the rationale behind the motion, the rationale behind identifying this particular consulting firm, and yeah, maybe just start with those first two things.
Yeah, it's a great idea. So to remind people of the context behind this. So ward boundaries are meant to be representative of population and the way in which population naturally grows. The way in which they're meant to be reviewed is about every 4 to 5 election cycles, recognizing that that's about every 16 to 20 years, and municipality and communities grow. So in order to maintain proper representation, what we are supposed to do is every 4 to 5 cycles is to review to see how the population has changed so that there's proper representation. Port Hope is on its 7th election cycle and still has not done that evaluation. So by doing the ward boundary review, what happens is a consultant will come forward, will do a fulsome evaluation on the way in which the population has grown over the last 25 years, and then come forward to council with recommendations as to how we can better represent our community by making sure that we've got the proper ward boundaries set up. What that means for the municipality of Port Hope is we would end up getting a number of these recommendations come forward. Council would be able to go through them all, choose the one that we feel would give the best representation to our citizens, and then we would move forward from that. In tandem with this comes a council composition review. So what it would look at is say, do we have the right number of councillors for the representation that we have? And that's not a case of, you know, should this get 2 or should this get 4 or should this get, it would probably mean, and this is me speculating, is that it would look at the number of wards and then say, let's make sure we've got a ward per, a councillor per ward, so that we have the right number. That could mean we go to 7, that would mean we go to 4, that no one knows. But it's over to us to be able to decide based on representation, do we have the right representation for our community? It's a good exercise that we should be going through every 4 to 5 council cycles. We are one of the only municipalities left in Ontario who has not gone through this since amalgamation. In fact, we may be the only municipality left who hasn't gone through this process. And this is not unusual. The provincial government does the same thing to redraw provincial boundaries. The federal government does the same thing to redraw federal boundaries. And it's all meant to make sure that we're upholding democracy.
Thank you for that. And just one follow-up around identifying this particular consulting firm. There could be
Yes.
questions about
Why this one?
doesn't this go out to a
Yeah.
competitive process? Why are you
Yeah.
identifying this particular
Yeah.
consultant in this motion?
Yeah, thank you for, you did ask that and I wandered. So this particular consultant was brought forward because in the, according to the province, there really is no formal process for conducting a ward boundary review. So there is, the consultant that I brought forward is one that, generally speaking, has been determined by the province to have created a process that is best aligned for getting the best results. And the reason why I say is, generally speaking, is there is an opportunity during this process when it goes to community consultation that the community can appeal the choice that council makes, and it would go to the OLT as part of the appealing process. Then the consultant would have to go forward and explain why they came up with what they came up with. The reason why it's important that the process is the process is there have been examples in the past where councils have gone off script and created their own boundary reviews and have not been successful because it went off the process, or it went off, the recommended process. These folks have got a fantastic reputation for doing this. Most of the municipalities in our area have used the same ones. In fact, I think it was Trent Hills who just recently completed theirs with the same consultant. So what I've recommended is we have found a consultant that is got a wonderful reputation. We know of them. We can move forward and get this done by working with them.
Thank you. And Councillor Adam.
Thank you, and I appreciate all those updates. It's awesome. Now coming to the revised motion here, I'm looking at the clerk maybe to educate me a little bit. September 30th, 2026 will be in the middle of an election. I don't really know the lame duck type. Are we able to vote on something like this at that time? I just need a little education on that, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson, and that is a great question. So we cannot say if we will be in a lame duck period at this time. It would really be dependent on who decides to run in the upcoming municipal election. But if we were in a lame duck scenario, then absolutely this council would not be able to vote on this particular matter. My understanding from Councillor Attridge is that that is the deadline, and likely what would end up happening is that the consultant would bring the results much sooner. than the September 30th. And just, and we also have to remember that, there's not a lot of clarity right now with respect to how strong mayor powers would apply to something like this as well. So there would be some questions, and we've posed some questions to the ministry with respect to lame duck period and strong mayor powers as well. So we're looking for a response from them on that.
Did you have a follow-up? No, you're good? Okay. Councillor Jarrell?
Yeah, I got a couple things. First one is, how do you feel, Todd, that a ward boundary review could affect development?
Can you give me more on that,
Like
please?
right now, I think one thing of amalgamation we did get right is the boundaries. We have a clear rural and a clear urban wards, right? So I'm just wondering, when it comes to voting on developments, we tend to be all in agreement that urban should be kept the way it is, and you know what I mean? Like, you know where I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, I can answer that. Those are two different processes. So the county comes forward with the expansion of urban urban boundaries, or urban boundaries. So we would have seen some of this already, where they wanted to move the urban boundary a little further west. We talked about, should it go up a little further north? There was a proposal that maybe it should go a little further east. So the county would dictate to us where the urban boundaries are and where settlements should be developed. But that is different from an electoral ward boundary review, which is the people inside that box are represented by the councillor that they elected. So those are two different processes, and they don't actually connect.
You had a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, please.
So as far as appeals, do we need, maybe this is a question for staff, do we need legal representation for every appeal that comes in?
Not necessarily. It would really depend on the nature of the appeal.
Okay, I'll turn it
Sorry.
over to Councillor Todd and then back to you,
And
Councillor
it's
Jarrell.
the consultants meant to take it forward. So what they end up doing, different from other OLT appeals, this would be the consultant would go in and defend what they had done for us, just to demonstrate that it was done properly.
Last one.
Yes, go ahead, please.
So if the wards, this is another question probably for staff. So if the wards change in time for 26, what kind of workload does that place on staff? Like, is there enough time? Because I would assume a bunch of stuff would then have to change along with that. Like, even like, how does the LLRW fund get split up? If we have a ward that is comprised of urban and rural, how does special and common services get applied? I'm sure we have lots of policies and bylaws that really define Ward 1 and Ward 2. So what kind of workload and time frame is that placing on staff?
So thank you, Councillor Toms, for that question. Obviously, a ward boundary and council composition review is a very large project, and it would be something that would take up a significant amount of resourcing. But that being said, the timelines that have been provided through the notice of motion that is here today do not necessarily say that they would be in place, that these changes would be in place for the 2026 election. In order for the changes to be in place for the 2026 election, this item would have to be considered by this council, likely by October of this year. And then once a decision is made by this council, then there would obviously be an appeal period. And again, if there is an appeal, then depending on when we get a result of that appeal, we may not be able to hit the December 31st deadline. That is a provincial deadline, so it is something that we do have to meet. So that's where I would say that. And in terms of the last piece of your question with respect to how things would be split up and how the ward boundaries would impact some of those things, my understanding is that would be a fulsome review that would be undertaken by the Watson and Associates. So they would be looking at all of those things as part of the ward boundary review.
Councillor Todd, I know you wanted to respond to this.
Yeah, and keep me honest on what I'm about to say, so step in. So what we would be responsible for in the first part is to choose one of the options that they put forward, and we would put forward a bylaw that would simply say we're adopting option A, say. If that is done by the 31st, sorry, by the 1st of January, then the next thing would happen is we would have to update Elections Ontario to let people know where their new ward boundary is, so they know when the election comes up next year who would be on their docket, right? So so that's the piece that would have to get done in 2026 to get ready for the election. Then there is another body of work that happens after that, which is to go through all the different bylaws and so on to update some of that stuff. In this particular motion, I made recommendations that we put funding in, so that in the event that it does go forward for 2026, we have an envelope of money to make sure that communication's going out properly to the community, and we've got an envelope of money to help corporate services update the electoral lists to make sure that they're ready. And then after that, there would be a body of work that has to get done to, do the bylaws and so on. One tweak? Go for it.
One small just clarification, Councillor Attridge. Elections Ontario has advised us that they would need the final ward lists, GIS information, by December 31st. So I just want to clarify that if that information is not provided, then it cannot move forward for the 2026 election.
Perfect. That timeline moves forward. So it would be something that we would either outsource because we have an envelope of money to do that, or we would do it internally. But either way, that would be our first window. We would have to hit that. If we couldn't hit that, then we would automatically look towards a 2030 election cycle, right? So that we have the time to do it.
Thanks, Todd. And I just want to jump in and say one other thing, which is when I'd spoken to Trent Hills about this process, that once they got to that place, that actually it was a fairly seamless and straightforward process. And they felt that because the process had so many steps embedded in it in terms of engagement and people's awareness, etc., that once they got to that place, that it was the least difficult in terms of implementation of getting that information out to the public. I'm not sure who was first, the deputy mayor or Councillor Less. Councillor Less?
I've got three things in here. First of all, we got some flowery language in here that doesn't need to be in there. Deputy mayor, guess what? The roles and responsibilities aren't going to change. The only thing that'll change is if we elect one, appoint one, or rotate it again. So take that out. That doesn't mean anything in context to this. Secondly, we have not experienced the population growth that is significant enough to spend this type of money now. 5 years from now, when we know where we're going with OPG and the county has laid out their expansion plans, yes. But for us to try and rush it for 2026, we'll probably end up duplicating this again 3 or 4 years down the road because we won't get it right. And the other one was, again, we're talking about ward composition and more, and one thing depends upon another, of course, but I think we're way premature in doing this study now.
Thank you, Councillor Lesson. I know that Councillor Todd wants to respond, and then I'm going to turn it over to the deputy mayor.
Yeah, so I appreciate those comments. I guess the way I would respond to it is the way in which the deputy mayor role and so on is put in there. It would be part of the council composition review. They may come back with a completely different viewpoint, whether it's elected or not elected. Like, they'll come back and they'll share the options. We of course get to vote on whichever option we choose. So they're simply going to put forward options. It's not a foregone conclusion. As far as population growth, I can't say for certain what the population growth has been in 25 years. You may have the figures. You're a pretty good number guy, but anyways, Yeah, it has grown by 6 people. Yes, you're right. And so it warrants a review, and it may come back saying, we're not changing. Highly unlikely, but my guess is the population of the municipality has grown significantly enough that it warrants the review. Would we be doing this again another 4 years? No. And even with Wesleyville, I know there's some concern about, Wesleyville could grow and so on, but the truth of the matter is, and we've heard through OPG, it's going to be 15 years before they even have the plant built. There's not going to be a population boom in Port Hope in that time. And quite frankly, 4 cycles out is 16 years. It's probably when you want to do the next one anyway. So I think the cycle is a good place to start now, and then we do them every 4 to 5 cycles as we're supposed to.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I just have two questions. These 3 budget amounts, where did you get those amounts from?
I got those from staff.
Okay. And the other question is, I know you said this is common procedure every so many cycles, but what prompted this to come forward now? And just one moment. So we had multiple surveys, we had procedural surveys, we had budget surveys, we had a lot of time to just kind of, just a simple question to the community, whether this is something that they're interested in. And we haven't discussed it at all. And I know we have the rural group coming forward right now. So I kind of question, is it because of that? Like what was the one thing that really said, now we need to do this?
Yeah, I would say for me, there certainly was parts of the rural focus groups delegations that struck me, because there was many times throughout it this narrative of they're not being treated fairly, they're not being represented fairly, they don't have the proper representation. And so that got me noodling around, okay, so how do we increase representation? How do we make sure we have fairness in our community? And so then as I started going through and doing some research on it, this was one of the things that came forward in my research was the best way to maintain representation is to make sure you're constantly updating your ward boundaries so that you have the right number of councillors representing the population that you put forward. It's something that we haven't done, and so that's why it came forward.
Thank you. Any further questions or, yes, Councillor Clare.
Just a comment, because on the population growth, our population has grown by close to 2,000 people since amalgamation, which is close to 12% population increase. So I would say that probably constitutes significant enough to warrant looking at the changes. I did also just want to say before we vote, Councillor Todd, how much I appreciate your friendly amendment. I think it's clear that you listened to some of the concerns and questions from your colleagues 2 weeks ago. And I think the change that in language that you propose certainly increases my confidence. I think it prioritizes the integrity of the process over any desired timeline. And in my view, is going to better ensure that this will unfold in a way that, gains community trust and results in a new system that reflects the representation we'd like to see. So thank you very much for making those changes.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. And I just want to add just a couple things on this. One is, for me, it's always important that our municipality stays up to speed and in line with where the best practices are across this province. And so if we are one of the last or the very last of all municipalities that underwent amalgamation that have not gone through this kind of process, that is troubling, that is problematic. Secondly, is we always talk around this table around issues of taxation and the tax levy. And we have a very unique opportunity to ensure that this work, which should have got done or needs to get done, isn't actually on the tax levy, which is very unique and very important as well. Councillor Less.
Yeah, I mean, 2,000, thank you for the number. That's like maybe 500 homes in Mason Homes, which is not significant in terms of growth. I mean, we're 17,000, 18,000 population. I would hardly call that significant enough to spend this type of money on.
Thank you, Councillor Less. Just one on this, on the point of growth, I'm wondering if we can just get some information around how many housing projects we've approved or in the works, what we're expecting in terms of new builds over the next, I don't know, 2 to 5 years.
Thank you, Mayor, for that question. I would be happy to look into that question and report back to council on the matter. I wouldn't be able to provide an accurate response right now.
Thank you. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
So my comfort level, just hearing some of these numbers actually doesn't provide me with more comfort because this is a significant amount of money. To Les's other point, what if we get it wrong? The growth has come in primarily the urban area, and I cannot imagine if we're doing this to try to make the rural folks happy. Can't imagine if it were to come back to say rural gets one representative. That's a lot of money to spend and maybe get there. Hypotheticals, but my comfort level pushing this at this point and feeling maybe pressured to not fully evaluate and survey the community at this point, I'm not comfortable with it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess on the flip side, it could be that there's more rural representation that would be at the table with the boundary review. Councillor Clare.
Just a clarification though, or correction. In fact, the majority of population growth has taken place in the rural area. And looking at the census numbers for 2000 for the former Hope Township and our current numbers per the municipality, the growth in the rural area has been 26% population growth compared to only 7% in Ward 1.
Thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Adam.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and I don't know if we have any staff here that has this this knowledge, but I believe we've already had a boundary change in the last 25 years. I think it came down like the Toronto Road, and now because of the subdivision at Mason Homes as well as subdivision off of Marsh, it now extends further from what I remember the previous map. So I believe there has been change, and I don't know if that changes the growth and where the growth has been, but there's more in Ward 1 because Ward 1 is larger too.
Yes, Director.
I just to add some additional information. So there was originally a proposed urban boundary expansion about probably almost 20 years ago now. And at the time that boundary expansion did not move forward, there was what was previously called an Ontario Municipal Board settlement with respect to the boundary expansion. Right now, Northumberland County is going through their official plan amendment process, and as part of that, they are proposing an urban boundary expansion for Port Hope to accommodate the projected growth numbers that they've recently adopted in their March amendment. So the numbers have been adopted, but the actual boundaries for Port Hope are still under consideration and review. To inform council on the matter, I am going to be preparing a report to bring forward to council for consideration with respect to the proposed urban boundary expansion. So that is to come, and but that is currently a matter being considered at the county level right now for the growth management OPI.
Okay, thank you. I think we've had a fulsome discussion around the table. Was there any further? So we have an amended. Oh, Councillor Less, yes.
I don't know whose figures or what figures are being thrown around, but I have Stats Can figures that the 2024 population was 18,651, and 2021 it was 17,294. So that's 1,300 people. So I don't know where this 2,000 number came from.
Okay. I think we flogged this horse. So we've got a revised motion that has a mover and seconder. Any last comments, questions? Okay, let's take it to a vote. All in favor? And opposed? And that is passed. Moving on to item 13, we have no notice of motions in front of us this evening. Moving on to item 14, bylaws consent agenda. Bylaws are passed by consent agenda. Would anybody like to remove a bylaw for separate consideration and discussion? And I just want to note that I'll be bringing forward 14.5, 27-2025, appoint a chief administrative officer for the municipality of Port Hope. Anyone else want to bring anything forward other than that? Okay, so I'm going to bring it forward, and I just want to read the mayoral decision number MDE 01-2025, dated May 15th, 2025, regarding delegating the authority to council to appoint Mr. Michael Milanishin as Chief Administrative Officer, CAO. Whereas the Strong Mayors Building Homes Act 2022 and subsequent amendments came into effect on May 1st, 2025, granting the mayor of the municipality of Port Hope additional powers and duties, including the authority to appoint the chief administrative officer. And whereas prior to the coming into force of these authorities, the Council of the Municipality of Port Hope had undertaken a thorough and transparent recruitment and selection process to fill the position of CAO in accordance with established municipal hiring practices. And whereas following this rigorous process, Council extended an offer of employment to Mr. Michael Milanishin, who accepted the offer pending formal appointment and by bylaw. And whereas under the current legislative framework, the authority to appoint a chief administrative officer rests with the mayor unless such authority is formally delegated to council. And whereas the mayor supports the outcome of council's selection process and wishes to respect and uphold the integrity of the process that took place prior to May 1st, 2025, and whereas the municipality of Port Hope is planning to conduct training on Strong Mayor's power in the near future, which will provide further insight and information on the scope and application of these powers, now therefore be it resolved that I, Alana Hinkivsky, the mayor of the municipality of Port Hope, pursuant to subsection 284.5 of the Municipal Act 2001 and all other applicable legislation, hereby delegate to the municipality of Port Hope Council my authority to appoint Mr. Michael Milanishin as Chief Administrative Officer for the municipality, and that the necessary bylaw be brought forward for adoption by council. Wanted to clarify that before we move forward with the appointment of our new CAO. Would anybody like to pull anything further for separate discussion? If not, we need to have a mover and seconder for this. Moved by Councillor Les, seconded by Councillor Adam. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on to item number 15. Welcome. You're passed. Item number 15, our question period is now time for question period. But before we go into question period, we're going to take just a 30-second break, and then we will just proceed with our question period. Hey, we're going to be reconvening now with our question period. It's now time for question period. Remember, purpose of question period is to make inquiries of council related to matters of municipal business. Please ensure you keep your questions brief and to the point. It's not meant to be an avenue for asking questions to staff. Please direct your questions to council. And if your questions are operational in nature, they may be best answered by a member of staff, and we'll record those questions and pass it on to the appropriate person. And when you do come up to the microphone, please identify your name and your address and ensure the purple button is on. Just before we get to you, Ed, any council members have any questions around the table? We don't have any media with us, and so now we're ready for questions from the public. Ed.
Ed White, Mill Street. Okay, so many questions, but I'm just going to go with one. What does, and I don't know, this is a question I've been asking, I think running over in my head for a long, long time. What does receive for information actually mean to, like, I don't know whether I want to ask everybody what it means, but I mean, does it mean that it's going to have further study, whatever it is, some kind of communication? Is it going to sit on the shelf? Or is somebody going to act on whatever, like, I really don't know what receive for information actually means. Do these things ever come back up again?
Great question, Ed. For the most part, receive for information means exactly that. When there is an alternative motion where there's actually direction and action that is requested by members of council, then whatever we're discussing and debating goes beyond just information sharing or receipt, and actually then is adjoined by some kind of concrete action. So there's nothing to be read into information, for accepted for information. It is exactly what it is.
Today we had the thing with the Humane Society, and it was put for information. Evidently, there's some kind of controversy. Not asking specifics or anything like that, but that type of thing, does that receive more study or staff, or does that get any other thing other than, okay, yeah, we know we got a problem, and it goes away?
Well, we've received it for information, so we are aware, and as Councillor Les and the Deputy Mayor had indicated, there is a planned meeting happening. Do you have any concrete dates for that meeting yet, Councillor Les?
We
or
don't. We'll
Deputy
wait for
Mayor?
Brian Gilmer to get back in. He wants to be part of the meeting, as he should be, and we'll, regardless of what the representative from the board said, we want a more fulsome answer from the full board.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to get specific with that one particular thing, but so sometimes there is a follow-up on it if.
There can be, but it's not necessarily the case that there will be, unless there's an explicit motion to do more than just receive for information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to move on to our confirmatory bylaw. It's now time for the confirmatory bylaw. This bylaw confirms the proceedings that took place this evening and provides for formal adoption through a bylaw. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Darrell, seconded by Councillor Clare. All in favor? And that is passed. This concludes our business to be covered on tonight's agenda. We've reached the end of the agenda, and I'm adjourning the meeting at 9:43 p.m. Thank you.